Hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone. Very excited to be here and to share this story tonight of Donna Grazia. So first of all, I'd like to thank Rabbi Levine, Aaron, and it's really great to see familiar faces here. I assume everyone can hear me. If I can just get a thumbs up if you do. Yeah, okay, fantastic. All right, terrific. So the first thing I wanted to discuss today is a woman who really deserves more of our attention because she plays such a huge role in Jewish history that her name definitely should be alongside people like Moses Montefiore or Theodore Herzl. She really is a person who transformed Jewish history, but not so many people know about it. Maybe because she didn't write a book, maybe because there's no movie about her, maybe she has to wait like Golda Meir for a good Hollywood blockbuster to get the credit that she deserves. But she definitely is up there with people like Golda Meir, with people like Theodore Herzl, Moses Montefiore, etc. The name of the woman is Donna Gracia Mendes Nasi, and her name actually, when she was born, was Beatrice, and she was born not knowing that she is Jewish. Now, just to give a quick background, many of you know, especially since you're that close to the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue, many of you know about the story of the Spanish expulsion, the story of the Anusim. And so what people don't realize is that the expulsion from Spain and the expulsion from Portugal were a few years apart. And so many Jews who fled persecution in Spain went to Portugal. Portugal then enacted a similar edict of forced conversion, minus the option of escaping, 5 or 6 years later. So Donna Gracia lived during this time in the early 1500s in Portugal. She was born and she didn't know she was Jewish. And I think that's another amazing part of this story, is how she goes from being someone who is so not knowledgeable of her identity to being so proud of her identity. So Donna Gracia is a young Jewish girl who is born in Portugal to a family that doesn't even tell her she's Jewish. When she's 12 years old, her mother takes her to the basement, and her mother tells her, listen, I have news for you. You're not Catholic, you are Jewish. And just think about that for a moment. Everyone here, think about the Jewish education you got. Think about the Jewish friends you have, about the Jewish holidays. Donna Grazia grew up with zero Jewish education, zero Jewish identity until she is 12. And when she's 12 years old, her mother tells her she's Jewish, and obviously that goes very deep into who she is. When she's 18 years old, she marries a fellow named Francisco Mendes, and he is one of the wealthiest people in Spain. In fact, it's a fun fact, but Donna Grazia that I'm speaking about now was the richest person in the world. In addition to the many good things she's done, she was the richest person in the world, definitely the richest woman at the time. So Donna Grazia marries this fellow named Francisco Mendes. I'll give you the exact year. She's born at, I'm sorry, she was born in around 1510. She was born in 1510, and 18 years later, she gets married. She marries a fellow named Francisco Mendes, who does a lot of business with black pepper. It sounds funny to us. Does everyone here have black pepper in their house? Well, it turns out it was a huge commodity back then, and Francisco Mendes was the partner of the King of Portugal. He had a huge banking company, and he also had a huge spice trade company, and we're going to see why that's important. So Donna Grazia gets married, and sadly, only 6 years after she gets married, her husband dies. Now, this is really where it kicks in, where her Jewishness kicks in. So you imagine this woman, she's born in Portugal, she's a converso Jew, they called it Nuevo Cristianos, new Christians, because they converted to Christianity, even though it was only kind of pretend. And she decides not to remarry. Can anyone think why she decides not to get married? She didn't remarry till the end of her life. Does anyone want to try and speculate why she never got married?
To hold on
afterwards?
to her husband's money.
She had her husband's wealth, and she wanted to have her say, and especially since she was now probably the richest woman in Europe. And so she didn't remarry. And this is when she starts doing bold things. She sends a letter to the Pope, And this is the equivalent. I don't know who the biggest bank today is, but let's say, I don't know, Chase. The head of Chase sends a letter to the Pope, so the Pope takes the letter seriously. And she says, I don't want my husband to be buried in Portugal. I want him to be buried in the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Now, think about this. In Portugal, everyone's anyway so paranoid about being Jewish. And here she is with no shame, probably because she had that wealth where she could do this. And she tells the Pope, listen, I don't want my husband to be buried in Portugal. I want him to be buried in Mount of Olives. Now, she doesn't say she wants him to be buried in a Jewish burial place in the Mount of Olives, but obviously, if you're a Christian at the time, if you're the Inquisition, you're thinking to yourself, this is not this person is not very loyal, right? You're thinking to yourself, this person is not very loyal. And so she does that. She asks the Pope for permission, and he gets buried in the Mount of Olives. Donna Gracia is very good at reading where things are going, and she realizes that Jews are not safe in Portugal, and she realizes that things are going to get worse for Jews in Portugal, which they do. So since her husband had a branch of his business in Antwerp, Belgium, she starts quietly moving all of their family assets to Antwerp. She does more and more business in Antwerp, and she moves the family business to Antwerp. So she discreetly, her husband's brother also moves there, and they're the super wealthy family, and they start living in Antwerp as Jews. This is where Donna Gracia's leadership comes into place. She starts a underground railroad. Basically, she starts allowing for Jews to move from Spain and Portugal out. She wants to get Jews, and this is something she does throughout her life. Has anyone ever heard of Jews moving out of Spain after 1492? Does anyone know where Jews went? Anybody? No? So many Jews after the Spanish expulsion. Yeah, I think. Do I need to unmute? Are you able to unmute yourself? Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, okay. Just raise your hand. Perfect. I think. Yeah. All right. There you go.
Amsterdam, Turkey.
Amsterdam, Turkey. So you're going to see that here's why Donna Gracia gets so much credit and we don't know about it. The reason they moved there is because of her. What she does is two things. Number one, she takes her family business ships and she lets people out of Spain and Portugal on her family business ships. One thing. The other thing she does is when you leave Spain and Portugal, it's very hard to leave with all of your assets. What she does is she has her people buy the assets of Jews who are trying to get out of Spain and Portugal, and she can do it because she has a company that's based there, and she buys their assets. She'll give them the money later, and she helps them on their family ships out. They get to Amsterdam, and we're going to see later she's sort of the pioneer of the idea that Jews should move to the Ottoman Empire. And so she does this work, and she gets people out of Spain, out of Portugal, and she brings them to Europe. That's the one thing that she does. And you have to understand it's a very risky thing to do. Another very important point is that it's hard for us to understand the concept of converso Jews and anusim. Why? Anyone here want to volunteer? It's kind of an imagination game. What would you do had you been in Spain or Portugal when there's this law that says convert to Christianity, die, or if you could in Spain, you could have left beforehand. You had the option at a certain point. In Portugal, that was never an option. What would you have done? Does anyone want to try and sort of scheme what you would have done to get out of that situation? Anyone here want to kind of speculate or say how your life would have looked? If yes, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Anyone? No? All right. Fantastic. Yes. So we have Joy. All right, 1 second. You should unmute now. Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, so I would follow Donna Grazia's example.
Right. So you would think so easy. Well, not so easy, but basically get out of Spain, get to safety, and fine, kind of lower your head while you're in Spain and Portugal and just get out of there. The problem is, in every Christian country, it is a crime punishable by death to convert from Christianity to Judaism. So if you want to survive your few days, weeks, months in Spain and Portugal, you need to convert to Christianity. I'm not going to get into the debate whether that was permissible, what people did or not, or how or what. But the point is, once you have converted to Christianity, which many Spanish Jews did, that's why they were called Nuevo Cristianos, new Christians, you now go to Italy, Belgium, Germany, France, anywhere you go, you are punishable by death if you convert back to Judaism. And so it's this difficult situation where that's why you have so many, and by the way, that's so important to our history as Jews in America and New York. You need to understand that the Jews who converted to Christianity and were converso Jews, they could not convert to Judaism in Brazil, Argentina, wherever Spain and Europe dominated. It was a crime punishable by death to convert back. And so it's hard for us to relate because we think of ourselves, okay, I would have been a Jew in the Middle Ages. We need to understand that to be a Jew and convert away is also, if you want to convert back to your Judaism, that's also punishable by death. So what Donna Gracia does is she helps the Jews out of Spain, out of Portugal. She gives them money for their assets. She helps get them to Belgium. She brings them through Northern Europe. She helps bring them to Belgium, Amsterdam. She sends them down to Italy. And then through Italy, she sends them to the Ottoman Empire, whether it is to Turkey or to Israel. But that's basically the work that she does. And it's incredibly courageous because obviously it's punishable by death. And so that's one thing that we just need to understand. If, as we say in Dayenu, if this would have been the story of Donna Gracia, Dayenu, she is a woman who alone, single-handedly, got many, many Jews out of Portugal, out of Europe, and brought them to safety. So that in and of itself is a phenomenal story, but it doesn't end there. Donna Gracia can feel the ground under her feet burning, and so she moves to Italy. She moves to Italy. I'll get the name of the city. It's a city that not many people are aware of. I myself will admit I don't remember. Here, Ferrara. She moves, maybe there's someone who's been there. Has anyone been to Ferrara in Italy? So she moves to Ferrara in Italy, and with her, you need to understand that to move is not just to move herself. She has to move the company offices, and she relocates to Ferrara. Why is this amazing? Because number one, in Ferrara, she opens a printing press. And she prints what's called the Ferrara Bible. I saw that they're selling them now, some of them on antique websites and auction houses. She prints the Ferrara Bible. The Ferrara Bible is a Bible. It's like the art scroll or the Sonsino of the Ladino Jews. It's a Bible translated into Ladino. And she prints it and she gives out many, many Bibles. She also prints other Jewish works. And just stop for a second and think about what's going on until now. You have a woman who is managing a very successful business. She's managing the largest company. She's the wealthiest person in the world. She's growing the business. It's not like she's doing full-time philanthropy. She's growing the business successfully. She's helping Jews escape Europe, escape Spain and Portugal. And now she opens a printing house. She prints Bibles, she prints Jewish books, and she's very passionate not only about saving Jews, but also about spreading Judaism, whether it's through the Bible or other books that she prints. And that's her story in Ferrara. She's extremely active in building synagogues and sustaining Jewish life. And that's what she does. In Ferrara, she gets into, there's always the problems with the money and family. She gets into a very unfortunate situation with, of all people, not a person you want to have a dispute with, but she gets into a dispute with her own sister. Why? So Donna Gracia, today we frown on this, but in those days, people married relatives of theirs. So Donna Gracia married her uncle, Francisco Mendes. by the way, they're from, for those who know, they're from the Benevishti family, which is a very prestigious Sephardic family, and Nasi, which means a president. It's like descendants of Rabbi Judah the Nasi. So the families are very prestigious, Benevishti and Nasi. And her sister marries her husband's brother. So it's two sisters married to two brothers. Now, interestingly, and you see her brother's good judgment and her husband's good judgment and his brother's good judgment. When her husband died, very unusual, he leaves half of his assets to his widow and half to his brother. When her brother-in-law dies, he also leaves her the family wealth. Now, you can imagine that the sister did not appreciate that. When you find out that your own husband left all of your assets to your sister, not to you, it's kind of, you can imagine that would not be a pleasant Passover Seder to sit with your whole family. It could be awkward, right? So he leaves the wealth to her, and it becomes a huge case. It's a case litigated among the kings, and Rabbi Isaac Caro, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, also sits on this. And as part of the question of who has jurisdiction, she moves out of Ferrara to a different place. And eventually, between all the different courts, it's actually interesting. Rabbi Moshe Caro, Rabbi Yosef Caro, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, sides with her in the end, but not necessarily the whole way, as do other people. So she now has to sort of flee and keep the wealth, and she embarks on her next journey. She moves on. She realizes that things are not great for Jews in Europe as a whole, and she moves to Istanbul, where she develops an excellent relationship with the Sultan. Now, the Sultan, and by the way, this is very relevant for today. You see everything that's going on with anti-Semitism. The Sultan laughs his head off. He cannot believe what Europeans are doing by targeting Jews. For him, it's the best thing for him. He says, you know what? If you don't like these smart, brilliant people who are great at business and are good for the societies they live in, excellent. Your loss is my gain. And the Sultan Suleiman, takes in the Jews, and Donna Gracia develops a great relationship with him. And this is where she thinks of an idea that I'm telling you that had she written a biography or something like that, her picture would be today in every Jewish day school. Why? Because she comes to the Sultan and she says, I have an idea for you. I want to lease from you the land of Israel. Right? We talk about Herzl as the person who envisioned the Jewish state. No, Donna Gracia, Mendes Nasi, she is the first one to come up with this idea. She comes to the Sultan, Sultan Suleiman in the 1550s, and she says, look, I would like to lease from you a big city in Israel and have Jews move there, specifically the Jews that I get out of Spain and Portugal. First, she tries her luck. And which city do you think she asks for first? Anyone? You can, by a raise of hand, I'll unmute you if you want. But which city do you think Donna Gracia asks for first? Anybody gonna try and guess? Yerushalayim. And for this, you already need more history of Jerusalem to know. Why would Sultan Suleiman not agree to Jerusalem, of all people? Anyone know why Sultan Suleiman would not? Technically, the Ottomans... Yeah, sorry.
The mosque.
The mosque, yeah. I'll give a hint. Who, you know, when you walk today in Jerusalem and you see the walls of the old city, who built those walls? Who built the walls? Suleiman. So Jerusalem is kind of too close to his heart. He is the one who built the mosque of the Dome of the Rock. He is the one who built the walls of the old city after he had a dream where God told him he's neglecting the holy city. And so he's not happy to lease out, even if the richest person in the world comes to him, he's not particularly happy and ready to lease out this city. At the same time, he does agree to give her a different city. Which city does he agree to give to her? The city...
Tiberia.
Ah, excellent.
Tiberia.
Very good. Yes, the city of Tiberia. At the time, there was not one single Jew living in Tiberia. I don't even know if anybody else was living there. It was destroyed by crusaders who've come all the way from Hungary, from Iran. I know it sounds, we think of Crusades, we think more of France and Ashkenaz, but actually people came from Hungary and from Iran, and they came to the city of Tiberia and they absolutely wrecked it. It was not livable. So Donna Gracia takes her second choice. She says, you know what, you won't give me Jerusalem, I will take Tiberia. She builds the city of Tiberia. She creates ideas for commerce, business. Obviously, she has the background. She's a very excellent businesswoman. She has tons of experience with trade. So she tries to develop a basis for people to make a living. And she rehabilitates the city of Tiberia. She lets people live there. She moves Jews who she has saved to Tiberia, and people move there. Now, this is an extraordinary thing. Why? 100 years later, let me ask a question to the audience. 100 years later, unfortunately, there were not many Jews living in Tiberia. It was not a successful endeavor. Why is it still a phenomenal thing? Why is it still an amazing thing that she rebuilt the city of Tiberia and got Jews who were fleeing Spanish persecution to come there? Can anyone think of why her legacy is so much more important than those 100 years that had Jews living in Tiberia? You had to visit northern Israel to kind of answer this. Right near the city of Tiberia, does anyone know what goes on in right near the city of Tiberia? You have the city, sorry?
There, spot.
Tzfat, yes. So it's actually interesting. The Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who's this beacon of Lurianic Kabbalah and the revival of Jewish mysticism, he lives in Tveria that Donna Gracia arranged. So he's a beneficiary, a great Jewish author named Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh, who wrote a famous book. Sometimes you hear people quoting the Al-Sheikh. He lived in Tveria, but in a way more important than the actual return to Tiberia are the waves that this creates in the Jewish world. In those days, everyone knew about the name Rothschild 100 years ago, because he was a very wealthy man. He was Jewish. In those days, Donna Gracia's name was a legend throughout the Jewish world. And so Jews hear the word that Donna Gracia has been buying land in Israel, settling Jews in Israel, and that creates a huge wave. Now, that leads to people moving to Tzfat, and it leads to a beginning of a process that took 400 or 500 years of Jews returning to Israel, of Shivat Zion. But she was the first one in 1,400 years since the destruction that Adrian wreaked on Israel, to say, look, why don't we have Jews start organizing a return? Yes, there were smaller efforts of Jews to return to Israel. You have Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe Rottenberg, but the idea that someone of the scale that Donna Gracia was capable of should go and buy huge amounts of land in Israel is really an extraordinary one, and she really deserves credit for that. At the same time, while she buys the land of Tiberia, while she develops the land of Tiberia, she also continuously builds synagogues in Turkey, in Italy. And if you've ever been, I don't know if anyone here has ever been to Turkey, in the city of Izmir in Turkey, there's a synagogue named La Señora, and it's called the La Señora, or the Giveret. Giveret means, in modern Hebrew, it means just a woman, but actually in more biblical Hebrew, Giveret is more like a gvir, like a very wealthy person. And so there's a synagogue in Izmir called the La Señora Giveret Synagogue. And that is because it's a synagogue that Donna Gracia built. And so taking all these things into account is just an amazing thing to recognize, that you have this woman in the 1500s who grows up completely not even knowing that she's Jewish, hearing when she is 12 that she's Jewish, and then just going on to transform the Jewish world and the land of Israel, whether it's with getting Jews out of Spain, getting Jews to the land of Israel, buying land of Israel, and all that is just absolutely amazing. Now, there's a very famous episode where you can see her courage. We need more people like her today. because
Right.
yeah, sorry.
Oh.
There's something called the Ancona affair. What happened? There's a city in Italy
Yeah.
named Ancona, and is someone trying to ask a question or no? Okay. There's a,
Start to the point.
sorry? No?
I think you have to mute everybody.
Okay, yeah, okay, we're good. So basically there's a city named Ancona, and the city of Ancona, Italy, has a port, and the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, which we think of in terms of Spain and Portugal, but actually the Spanish Inquisition goes all the way to South America, it goes to Italy, it goes everywhere, and it hunts down converso Jews, and it says, okay, if you convert back from Christianity to Judaism, we will torture and kill you. So the Inquisition announces that in the city of Ancona, they found 100 Jews who converted out of Christianity back to their Judaism, and they start persecuting them. Donna Gracia says, not going to happen. She sends letters to everyone she can, and she says, we will boycott, our ships are going to boycott the city of Ancona. We will not go to the port there if you do not let these Jews go. This creates a rift within the Ancona community. Why? Because if you're a Jew who never converted out of Christianity, then you're doing business and you're having a great time in Ancona. Fine, your life is great. But if you're a Jew who fled Spanish and Portuguese persecution, and you are now trying to practice Judaism in Italy, and you're hunted down by the Inquisition, you're literally being tortured and killed. And so the Jews who are traditional Jews or who never stopped being Jewish, they're like, wait, why are you boycotting our city and trying to cripple us economically? Why is that our fault? On the other hand, the Jews who were being persecuted, their lives are on the line. So Donna Gracia arranges an international boycott against that and against the Pope. She has, the Pope at those times is the most powerful man in Europe. She has no problem going to war with the Pope, and she tells the Pope, listen, we're going to cripple this city. She takes all the means she can, and she tries to put pressure to save these Jews. Unfortunately, it does not succeed. Her boycott is successful, but the Spanish Inquisition are such extremists and so irrational that they torture the Jews of the time. I just want to add one thing that I don't think people realize. Has anyone, by a raise of hand, horrific images, has anyone ever seen the old images of the Spanish Inquisition torturing Jews? Has anyone seen those pictures?
Yes.
So yeah. So one of the reasons they're so grotesque, it's sort of this skewed religiosity, where they had the belief, I guess similar to Jehovah's Witnesses, that you're not allowed to shed blood. So they would never shed blood to Jews, which is why they engaged in these extremely inhumane forms of torture that went from stretching people and waterboarding people and doing these really horrific forms of torture, all out of their sort of religious belief that they shouldn't shed any blood. So it's important to understand how extreme the Spanish Inquisition was, how it sort of went all over the world, and how Donna Gracia was, in a way, I think another way that she's a pioneer and a Jewish hero is because she really has no problem looking at the Pope and saying, we're not going to be pushed over. If you're going to persecute Jews in Ancona, I will arrange a boycott of Jews all over the world, and we will make sure that you will cripple the city economically. Again, unfortunately, it did not work. 100 Jews in those in Ancona were tortured to death. But at the same time, it's important to note that her idea that Jews should look back and say, we're going to fight back is important. It looks like we do have a question. If you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you. It looks like we do have a question. Yeah?
They also, during the Inquisition, that affected all the Jews, right? Not just the ones who had converted to Christianity and went back to Judaism, right?
Hello.
Good question. So if you are living in, if you're living in Spain and Portugal, it didn't make much of a difference, right? You're a Jew, regardless of whether you convert to Christianity or not. If you're outside Spain and Portugal and you've already converted to Christianity, then the Inquisition is going after you. But if you're Jewish, they're not. Meaning, if you're a Jew who lives with a license, a permission from the king, the owner of the land, in Italy, in Brazil, wherever it may be, if you're living as a Jew your whole life, then they're not coming after you. But if you are a Jew who converted in Spain so that you can get out, and now they know that you're a Christian that converted back to Judaism, then they're going to come after you. And that's where you have the divide, like in the city of Ancona, where the Jews living there with the license are like, wait, we're just regular Jews in the Jewish quarter. Let us do business here. On the other hand, the Jews who are converso Jews who wanted to return to Judaism, wanted to live as Jews, and were persecuted by the Inquisition, they needed Donna Gracia to stand up for them. And so basically, her whole life was really dedicated to the Jewish people, but especially to her people, meaning Jews of Spain and Portugal. And her mission was to save them from the Inquisition and to let them live as Jews, whether it comes to saving them getting out of there, or printing a Bible in Ladino, printing Jewish books, building synagogues all over Europe, in Israel, and in Turkey. That's what she did. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and they actually stopped after they killed the Jews who didn't have a license.
It's a good question, meaning, did the Spanish Inquisition persecute Jews in other places? I think they did, but I believe that in Italy it probably took a little bit of a, it was maybe in less of a form. I honestly don't know. I'm going to show in a moment, I'm going to share my screen soon and show pictures. There's many books about Donna Gracia, and I'm going to show you some of the pictures of those books, because each one has a title that sort of conveys who she was and why she was so important, and what she's done. So in a minute I'll speak about what the names of the books about her, and why each one of them sort of speaks to a different part of who she was. But look, to fight the to fight the Pope anywhere is just a very bold move, and that's something she has done. So I'm just going to quickly bring up here a few pictures of Donna Gracia here. So this is a picture of her and her daughter. She had one daughter before her husband died. Her husband died 6 years into their marriage when she was 25 or 28. This is a coin that was issued in Israel in honor of Donna Gracia. You see, it says at the top, Rabot Banot Asu Chayil, V'chana Nasi Alta Al Kulana, which is a term that people used in those days. So there, many women have done great things, but Chana Nasi, she's surpassed everyone. And I honestly, maybe someone here can help me know the answer. I don't know what the A and the P stand for on this coin, but this is a coin honoring 500 years to Donna Gracia. This is a stamp that Israel issued in honor of Donna Gracia. We're going to see in a second why they did it, and specifically at this year and this place. But you can see this is from 1969, and it says that she lived from 1510 to 1569, but approximately. So here are the names of the books. I think this is to me the most amazing, because these books really get the essence of who she was, the woman who defied kings, because it's important to understand how much she was bold and how she looked kings and popes in the eye and was like, no, I'm not going to cave into any of your anti-Semitism or whatever it may be. And by fire possessed, which is also true, she was very passionate and just constantly doing great things. And for the Jewish people, here's one more. Donna Gracia, the Jewish woman who led Jews to safety in Muslim lands. And that is because she took Jews to the Ottoman Empire. Here's another book about Donna Gracia Mendes Nasi. Here's a picture of the Ferrara Bible. For those who are curious and like Judaica, I saw it selling for $1,000 So it's this Bible that she printed in Ladino, not with Hebrew letters. Here's a beautiful place I love seeing, and I hope everyone's looking. This is a place in Tiberias, in the city of Tiberia, and it's called Mitzpe Donna Gracia. It's called the sort of the Parmonad of Donna Gracia. It's overlooking the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. It says Chamesh Me'ot Shana L'Uladeta. It's 500 years to her birth, and 1510 to 2010. The name that they give her is Chana, although I'm not familiar of where she, when she took on a Hebrew name, but I'm just gonna read it. Donna Gracia hi Chana Nasi. It's Chana Nasi. Bat lemishpachat Anusim Yehudim Migurashei Sfarad of Portugal. So she's the daughter of a family from Spain and Portugal who are a family of Anusim. Here's something inaccurate. She was one of the richest women. She actually was not. She was the richest woman and possibly the richest person in the world at the time. And it says he kedisha et oshra agadi. She gave her legendary wealth. She dedicated it. And the kshara and her connections lahatzalat acheha bnei am hayehudi lachar girush Sfarad. So she used her wealth to help her brethren during the time of the Inquisition, or after. Here, Bishanat 1560. So in the year 1560, I'm just going to read straight say the translation. She initiated the Jewish state in Tiberias and renewing the Jewish community in Israel with the permission of the glorious Sultan Suleiman. So here it says Donna Gracia is a Jewish leader who shows how important Jewish women are to Jewish history and to history as a whole and to Jewish history specifically. And so that's the story of Donna Gracia. And she's honored. Actually, it's interesting. In Tiberias, I never heard of something like this. There's a hotel that also has a museum. Has anyone here ever been to a hotel that also has a museum? I've never heard of that. Oh yeah, we have something like that. Yes. So I see that we have one example. You've been there?
Yes, I think we visited when we were in Tiberia last time. And
wow.
yeah, so that's why I knew that she had something to do with Tiberia. Yeah, when you asked the question. So yeah.
Wow. So
yeah.
And did you get to see the museum as well?
I think that's what we went to see. It's in the first floor of the museum. I don't recall it exactly, but I do remember there was some exhibit about her and about what she had done for the city.
Wow. So yeah, so you have that a hotel and a museum in the same place. It's called the Donna Gracia Mendes. It's called the Donna Gracia Hotel, but also the a museum is there. At this dedication that I showed you, the Prime Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, spoke. This is in 2010. He was the president of Israel. I'm going to read to you what he said in English because it really captures who she is and what she's done. Here's what Shimon Peres said about Mendes Nasi, speaking at the 500th birthday. He said as following. He said, the peaks, at an exceptional and uplifting message to our generation, the peaks that Donna Gracia reached are harder to attain than the summit of Everest. Mountains end at their peak, but Donna Gracia is a peak that never ended. To be a woman, to be Jewish, to be alone, to create astounding wealth, to break every barrier, to overcome every obstacle, to return to her identity and to uplift her people, to move with such strength without protection, to triumph without an army, and ultimately to be raised as a beacon for generations to come, and above all to transform her legendary wealth into cultural and historical wealth for her people. Donna Gracia was larger than life. And I think the word that captured my attention most in Shimon Peres's discussion of Donna Gracia is the word alone. You need to understand what it means. Yes, she was the richest woman in the world, and you gotta, that there's protection that comes with that. But to be a woman all alone in middle-aged Europe and to be Jewish and to do everything that she has done from initiating the buying in the land of Israel, from starting a printing press that printed more than a dozen of books, from creating a underground railroad that let Jews out of Spain. All of this to negotiate, to start a war with the Pope, an economic boycott on Ancona, all these things to realize that she did that as a woman who was widowed at the age of 28, I think is something that is mind-boggling. That's why I said she's someone on the scale of a Herzl, of a Moses Montefiore. Her vision of Shivat Zion, of the returning to Zion, attracted people like the Arizal, of Lurianic Kabbalah, Rabbi Isaac Luria. It attracted many Jews to Tveria, who later became the Jewish community of Tzfat, who later became the Jewish community in Jerusalem. And so it's sometimes you don't know what the impact of your actions is going to be till hundreds of years after you die, and that's really what she has done in terms of Shivat Zion and Zionism. But even just the impact of getting Jews out of Spain and helping converso Jews, I think, is phenomenal. And her idea of fighting back and inspiring, I think, is immense. If you look at what happened, by the way, just in terms of converso Jews, what happened in New York, I think that's also something everyone should be aware of. So, and it has the spirit of Donna Gracia in it. So when Jews arrive in Manhattan in the early 1600s, the Governor Stuyvesant decides he's going to target them for expulsion. And they say, look, we have news for you. Does anyone know the name of the company? The India Pacific? Is that it? The Indo-Pacific Company? Was that the company that bought Manhattan originally? Yes. Here I see someone wants to say something. Does anyone know?
Dutch West India.
Dutch West India. So they came and said, sorry, Governor, but Dutch West India actually owns this island and we're not going to put up with this. So I think that bears the spirit of Donna Gracia in it, the idea that Jews don't just take the persecution that comes their way, they fight back, they speak back. I think all that are things that reverberate to this day. And the only thing that makes me sad about her story is the recognition that she's not recognized as universally as she should. I mean, she should be in every Jewish day school. Just the legacy that she has, the many things that she's done are really of a scale that we owe her more, meaning history owes her more. She deserves a more central place in Jewish history. And that's the story of Donna Gracia. If anyone has questions, comments, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, yeah.
I
Joy.
believe that Sarna has written quite a bit about her also.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
The
Yes.
historian Sarna.
Mm-hmm. So it is written, but maybe I'm projecting my own experience, just as someone who grew up with Jewish history and by the way, material about her is included in the Israeli schools curriculum. Still, I think just the magnitude of what she has done, definitely she deserves more of a sort of a universality among our people. But yeah, look, she did a lot, and we can never thank her enough. The biggest testimony to what she's done are the many descendants of the Spanish Portuguese Jews she saved, and the land of Israel. That's also a testimony to her.
Just a short question. Did her daughter, how did her daughter continue her legacy?
Very, very good question. So her daughter, Anna, as she married her uncle, everyone sort of married, within the family. So her daughter, if you guys are interested in this, I think this deserves another book. But her daughter there was discussion of her daughter marrying a son of King George in England. She was sought after by many people, including kings, and including the King of England. But she ended up marrying someone within the family from the Benedicti Nasi family, who continued her philanthropy inside the Ottoman Empire but it definitely on the movie level. If you're gonna do a movie, the story of her daughter, the daughter of the richest woman in the world, being sought after by so many, I think that's worthy of a story in and of itself.
Obviously for her wealth. I mean, kings usually do that. They want to amass wealth.
it's interesting,
An alliance.
usually we
yeah.
think of the king as the most powerful one, but in those days, the governments relied on wealthy people. Whether it's, by the way, her family helped fund a lot of the expeditions. They had a great shipping company. And so kings relied on families like the Mendes Nasi family for funding for huge expeditions or for whatever it may be. And so yeah, her daughter Anna was sought after by kings. At the same time, you need to understand that coming from a background of persecution, the way Spanish Jews were persecuted, you cannot blame her for not trusting anyone outside her family. In fact, even inside her family, her biggest challenge in life was the challenge of her sister, who wanted to have the family wealth. And actually, I didn't mention this, but her sister even went to the Inquisition and surprise, surprise, told them that her sister is actually really a practicing Jew. But I'm sure they
Wow.
figured it out by then. But yeah, they married within the family, and that's who her daughter ended up marrying. And I think her grandson, that would be, also was very active, but that's more local Ottoman politics, like inside Istanbul, Izmir.
So
right.
interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we're set. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I very much appreciate it. And may we all be honored enough to carry on the legacy of Donna Grazia's care for the Jewish people and for looking out for others. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Very
you.
interesting.
Good night.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good night.
Very
Thank
interesting
you.
talk.
The archaeology.
Thanks.